Prison is a second-by-second assault on the soul, a day-to-day degradation of the self, an oppressive steel and brick umbrella that transforms seconds into hours and hours into days. Mumia Abu Jamal. If you've been following me for any length of time, you know that I was prosecuted for making false statements to the federal government. If you ask the media, you get a version that suggests my motives were to defraud the women and children entrusted in my care and to bilk the system. However, if you consider the fact that the prosecution submitted no evidence to this effect, and that all the evidence in the courtroom was provided by my defense team, demonstrating my intention to serve women after I discovered a flaw in the government paperwork, you might start to see the truth. My so-called crime was committed in good faith, with the intention of serving those in need under a system that was already broken. Yet despite the facts, despite my intentions, the harsh reality is that I was incarcerated. I was sentenced to federal prison for lying to the government, and this sentence was carried out before the eyes of the entire world. You would think that the hardest part of the journey was being locked behind bars. But let me tell you something. My physical prison was not the real battle. It was my emotional prison that had tested me, one that gripped my heart long before and long after my physical release. You see, my physical imprisonment was surface level. It was concrete, tangible, something you can measure in time. There were 4 walls that confined my body, but the walls that confined my spirit, those were invisible, insidious, and infinitely more challenging to break free from. My emotional prison was the suffocating fear, the relentless shame, and the crushing guilt that consumed my every thought. It was the constant replay of what ifs and why me that held me captive. Leading up to prison, I was already imprisoned in my mind. The fear of the unknown, the judgment from others, the anxiety of what was to come, all these thoughts were my jailers. They robbed me of my peace, stole my sleep, and made me question my own worth. The hardest part was not stepping into that prison cell, but learning how to step out of that prison cell with my soul intact. When the judge's gavel came down and I heard the sentence, it felt like the ground was pulled from under me. My entire identity was shattered. I had built my life on helping others, and now I was being painted as a villain. The shame of it all wrapped itself around me like chains. I lost over 80 pounds, and my hair fell out in clumps due to the sheer emotional strain. The toll it took on my body was nothing compared to the toll it took on my spirit. It affected every part of my life. I was not the same mother, the same wife, the same person. My parenting suffered because I was emotionally absent. My marriage was tested as my husband tried to support me while I was drowning in despair. I found it hard to trust even those closest to me because I had been so badly burned by a system I tried to work with in good faith. But despite all of this, there came a point where I had to make a choice. I could continue to live in this emotional prison, letting it choke the life out of me, or I could fight for my freedom. Real freedom. Not just the kind that comes from walking out of a physical prison, but the freedom to be at peace with myself. I had to learn to forgive. Not for being guilty of what I was accused of, but for being human. For making mistakes. For trusting systems and people that would eventually betray me. I realized that the greatest experience prison taught me was this. It strips you of everything until all you are left with is yourself. There is no mask to hide behind, no title to lean on. You are left with your fears, your regrets, and your raw, unfiltered self. And if you can find a way to come to terms with that person, then and only then can you be truly set free. So I ask you today, what is your prison? It may not be a literal one with bars and guards, but perhaps it's the prison of your mind. Perhaps it's the fear of what others think, the regret of past mistakes, or the guilt of not being perfect. Maybe it's the doubt that whispers you're not good enough, the anxiety that keeps you up at night, or the shame that makes you hide your true self. These prisons are just as real as any concrete cell, and they can be just as confining. The truth is, many of us are imprisoned by our own thoughts, beliefs, and fears. We are all held back not by what's outside of us, but by what's within us. It's easy to blame circumstances, other people, or external forces, but the real prison walls are the ones we build around our hearts and minds. The key to breaking free starts with acknowledging that you are your own jailer. So, how do you break free? The first step is to recognize that you are not your past. You are not your mistakes. You are not defined by the opinions of others. Yes, I went through hell. I faced a 10-year sentence, lost weight, lost hair, lost sleep, but I refused to lose myself. And that's why I'm here today, reaching an international audience, sharing my story, not because I'm perfect, but because I refuse to give in to my emotional exhaustion. The second step is to find your purpose in your pain. I realized that my greatest pain will become my greatest testimony. The very thing that tried to break me was the thing that gave me strength to rebuild. If I had given into my emotional prison, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. I turned my wounds into wisdom, and that's the key to transformation. And the third step, forgive yourself. Let go of the shame, the guilt, the self-blame. It's time to release the chains that are holding you back. If you can forgive yourself, you will find that the prison door was never really locked. It was just waiting for you to push it open. So I ask you again, what's your prison? What's keeping you from living your life fully, freely, and fearlessly? It's time to break out. You don't need a judge to set you free. You have the power to set yourself free today. Embrace the peace that comes from being at one with yourself. Don't let your emotional prison keep you from reaching your next level. So I'll leave you with this. Acknowledge your emotional prison. Name it. Face it. And confront the fears holding you back. Transform your pain into purpose. Use your trials as stepping stones to elevate you. And finally, forgive yourself. Release the past and step boldly into the future with a heart full of hope. It's time to break free. The door is open. Will you walk through it? Peace and blessings, Dr. O.